Welcome back to the Racial Draft Podcast, where we change the complexion of the comic book universe, one draft pick at a time. I am your host, Michael Ford, having another one of these solo episodes. One of these days, we'll actually get some guests in there, but for now, we're just going to go through what we normally do and run down the picks in round six. 6 of 12. We are at the halfway point of this season draft. And like I said, let's just get right into it. Starting off round six was the Native American delegation, who've had pretty strong showing so far. They ended the last round by drafting Sue Storm. So they started the new round by drafting Johnny Storm. Makes sense, brothers, sisters. Storm does, could be a Native American last name for sure. Obviously, there's the whole blonde hair of it all, which does lend itself to people imagining them as white. And that's unfortunate because there's actually nothing in Johnny Storm's personality that suggests that he has to be a white guy. But that's just my opinion on matters. From the perspective of the people, though, the people were pretty negative on it. Unfortunately, they were 40%. 40% approval rating, 20% strongly approve, and 20% somewhat approve, with 40% somewhat disapprove of Native American Johnny Storm, and 20%, full 20%, strongly disapproving of the pick. Like I said before, a little disappointing because, I don't think, whiteness is a necessary component of the Fantastic Four story. But if you feel otherwise, feel free to hit us up on all the various platforms. Racial Draft Pod on Twitter, racial.draft on Instagram and Threads. You can also email us at racialdraftpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear some of your long form thoughts about the picks, any of the picks thus far, but especially in the past couple of rounds. We move ahead from one pick to another, and that's the Latinx delegation. They selected Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. I know that this is a pick that they've made in the past. I believe that they're, without getting into the full-on backstory, her being Cuban, particularly, during the time of the Cold War, there were Cubans who did live in Russia. So the idea of, Natasha being a Cuban who was raised by a Russian family then be placed back into the West is a way that the story could definitely be modified to accommodate a Latina Black Widow. So, I would imagine that that's probably what they're going for with the story. And to that end, it's very creative. There was also a fan cast of Ana de Armas as Black Widow, and you may remember that she's going to be playing a Black Widow-esque character in the Ballerina. I think that's what's called, John Wick spinoff. So suffice it to say, maybe in a subsequent season, there'll be even more positive viewpoint of the idea of Ana de Armas and the Cuban Black Widow. However, also disappointing this time out, as they are only at 55% approval rating for Latina Black Widow. 44.4 strongly approve, 11.1 somewhat approve, 33.3 somewhat disapprove, and 11.1% racist. With respect to the fan cast, even lower, shockingly, 44.6% approving of that pick, with 45 point, I'm sorry, I meant 54.6. And yet 45.5 strongly approve, 9.1 somewhat approve, 18.2 somewhat disapprove, and 27.3%, more than a quarter of y'all, strongly disapproved of the casting. Again, another situation where I'd love to hear people's thoughts behind this. I should have mentioned before that there are a number of places that you can cast your approval votes. The favorite is racialdraft.com. That's the main website, the hub, if you were, if you will, rather, so that you can sort of see all the picks, all of the polls, and scroll through the history of the racial draft. You can also find us on the various social medias. Like I said, there's polls on Twitter, and there are also polls on Threads. So you can vote in the three places. You can, yeah, all three slots. So we will move on from the 52nd pick in this season to the 53rd. And this one, hopefully, will be one of the more popular picks because it's been talked about for a while now. And that's the Black delegation who selected Rogue. I don't know if you guys remember how that kind of went around on social media that Keke Palmer should play Rogue, who's a well known Southern styled character. Now, granted, she's typically depicted as white, but she had the Southern accent. She's not necessarily a Southern belle. She doesn't really come from money. In fact, she kind of comes from a hard scrabble background. So, perhaps it wouldn't take too much to reimagine her as a Black woman from the South, who, let's be honest, some of her proportions do sort of lend itself to us thinking about Rogue it's a little bit of a brick house, if you catch my drift. But 55.5% is the approval rating right now for Black Rogue, which is, again, disappointing. With respect to the fan cast, a little bit higher. The fan cast is sitting currently at 62.5%. Still a little lower than I expected, but obviously higher than for the pick generally. So go ahead, listeners, if you are still within earshot and you have access to the different platforms, go ahead and cast your vote, particularly on the website and on Twitter, if you approve of Black Rogue as depicted by Keke Palmer. We will keep it moving from there, from one Black character to another in a manner of speaking. Black Canary. This is definitely the Black round. Black Canary from the Jewish delegation. There's not too much to say about this character. The character is traditionally been depicted as a white presenting, with blonde hair. Obviously, there are Jewish people who have blonde hair. There's really nothing specifically, Gentile, if you will, about Black Canary. So, I can't imagine that there would be a lot of reason to disapprove of Jewish Black Canary, but to my chagrin, there has been disapproval. 62.5 approving of this pick, with all 62.5 strongly approving, but there's 25% somewhat disapproving and 12.5% strongly disapproving, which I can only attribute to anti-Semitism. It is quite the shame. Quite the shame. We move on from one Black character to another Black character, and that would be Black Cat. Black Cat was drafted by the Southeast Asian delegation, and I can understand, as we've said before, when you have a character that's been traditionally depicted as white, you get a little bit of pushback. Obviously, the white hair is not something that you normally imagine for, well, let's be clear here. She's probably dyeing that hair. It's not naturally occurring white hair. So, Felicia Hardy is a cat burglar. There's no reason that a cat burglar can only come from a Eurocentric background. I think that I'll leave it at that. I think that it would be kind of cool if Felicia Hardy were something other than white. Particularly if we're talking about the MCU, where Peter Parker has shown himself to have a wide range of love interests. But again, this is not just for the MCU. This is just in general. I think that Black Cat as an East Asian depiction could totally work. And finally, finally, the people are kind of on my side with a 77.8% approval rating for East Asian Black Cat. 77.8 all strongly approve, and 11.1 somewhat disapprove, and 11.1 are racist. That's right, racist. With respect to the fan cast, they fan cast Anna Sawai, Anna Sawai, who you might know from the Monarch television show, which aired on Apple Plus, and I believe she's going to play a big role in the um, in the Shogun series. Sorry, I was trying to remember the name of the series, which will be happening this week. So she will be much more of a fighter than um, much more of a fighter than a thief. But she definitely has the physicality that can allow her to play a role such as Black Cat. And again, high point approval, 87.5% approval rating for Anna Sawai as Black Cat. 75% strongly approve, 12.5 somewhat approve, and 12.5 somewhat disapprove. And again, if you have opinions about the pick, go ahead to our various places and cast your vote, cast your approval or disapproval, as it were, of the picks. Our run of Black characters has probably come to an end, uh, in a manner of speaking, I suppose, because the multiracial delegation has brought us a character who has been depicted as both white and Black, thus perfectly fitting within, as a famous rapper singer once said, got a light skinned friend look like Jessica Drew, and got a dark skinned friend that looks like Jessica Drew. Yes, Jessica Drew, Spider Woman, drafted by the multiracial delegation. Um, she has not, as far as I know, ever been portrayed in live action, but she was portrayed in Into the Spider Verse, by Issa Rae, voiced by Issa Rae, and a Black woman there. But like I said, traditionally depicted as at least lighter skinned. So I think that the multiracial delegation can kind of bridge the gap by having a lighter skinned Black woman portray the role. And I think that could work. She is British canonically, so it would help to have a light skinned British Black woman. And there was a fan cast. You might know her from the Fast and Furious movies, Natalie Emmanuel. You might also know her from Game of Thrones, where she played Missandei. She's worn both straight hair and natural afro hair, much like the character as you've seen her in the Spider-Verse movie. So I think that she sort of fits the bill. From an approval perspective, 72.7. Not bad. Oh, sorry, 73. Whoops. Oh man, doing math on the fly is not my forte. So sorry, 63.7 is where I am. 63.7 approval rating with 45.5 strongly approve, 18.2 somewhat approve, 27.3 somewhat disapprove, and 9.1% racist. With respect to the fan cast, however, we're looking at 80% approval rating, with 50% strongly approving and 30% somewhat approving and 20% somewhat disapproving. We will move, finally, not just the end to our run of Black characters, but our run goes right into the white delegation. And how to put this, white power girl. Yeah, white power girl. Oh, sorry, white power girl. Um, yeah, somehow that didn't help. Yeah, so Kara Zor-El from Earth 2, clearly the Monsignor. Um, Also known as Paige Stetler, in her more recent run, she also had the code name Karen Starr at one point. But Paige is representing the white delegation. She's obviously been traditionally depicted as white. So, who better to represent the power of the white delegation than White Power Girl? Um, which, unfortunate for Black History Month. But, look, I can't, I can't disapprove. She's got the infamous costume with the chest window. Very popular character, and she's all. I mean, she has been depicted that way. And jokes aside, yeah, there's not really too much of a reason to disapprove of Power Girl staying white. So, those of you who have different political proclivities than me might want to jump in there and cast your vote for White Power Girl. It might be the only time that Twitter uses their algorithm to elevate one of our racial draft picks. 80% approval rating for White Power Girl, which was a little, again, on Elon's Twitter, I expected higher, honestly. We move on from White Power Girl to the Swanamena delegation, a character who has also been traditionally depicted as white, but now racially bent to brown. Uh, let's find out whether the people agree. But that is Donna Troy. You might also know her as Wonder Girl. You might also know her as Troya. She's had a very interesting. We could take a moment out and talk about her sort of interesting run through the comics. Wonder Woman herself has kind of had a convoluted run in terms of her origin, whether she was born of man or born from clay. Well, Donna Troy said, "Hold my Amazon beer," because she was sometimes molded out of clay, sometimes uh, imprinted with uh, false memories, where she grew up with a mother and father. I'm not exactly sure what the current state of her origin is. All we know is that she's very much Wonder Woman's equal in terms of power and strength. We know that lately she has chosen to bridge the gap between the Themyscira Amazons and the Amazons of Bana Magdal, which are the Egyptian Amazons. Which does kind of put her, in the realm of the Swanamena delegation, in terms of uh, maybe better being depicted as brown, as from that, phenotypically at least, if not historically, from that part of the world, from the Middle East, North African, Southwest Asian part of the world. So, I personally like this reimagining. The people are a little bit more mixed, as they often tend to be this season. 71.4% approval rating for Donna Troy, Swana Donna, as it were, with 57.1 strongly approve, 14.3 somewhat approve, 14.3 somewhat disapprove, and 14.3 racist. You hate to see it. You really do. Um, and we move from Swanadana to Polynesian Shazam. As of yet, Billy Batson, Shazam, you might know him from a couple of movies that didn't make a lot of money at the box office. You might also know him through his appearances in cartoons and a 1970s series where he used to go by Captain Marvel, but no longer because of lawsuits. He's one of the kind of earliest superheroes. He's been around since the early days of Superman. In fact, the idea of a young boy who says a magic word and gets turned into a superhero has always been fairly marketable. And there's really no reason, honestly, that Billy Batson has to be white. If anything, I think that there's uh, a little bit more of a cool story that could be told about a character from a you know non marginalized background, getting superpowers and being able to live out that kind of superhero fantasy that's normally reserved for white characters. I think that there's room for the Shazam character to be reimagined. Who knows if we'll get to it? I know in other seasons we've had the Shazam acronym kind of be more malleable, not just be about Greek gods, but about gods from different pantheons, and spelling out different gods and heroes from those pantheons in order to endow Shazam with the wide range of powers that Shazam has. Who knows if the Polynesian delegation will go that far? But in general, I like the pick. I think it's pretty cool. The people kind of on my side, 71.4% approval rating, with all 71.4 strongly approving, and 28.6 somewhat disapproving. So yeah, I'm very curious about whether that gets fleshed out. Um, Might as well, because it would be a kind of cool story. But listeners, feel free, if you disagree, to go ahead and hit up the site and the Twitters, and let us know whether you approve or disapprove of the pick. And that brings us to the final pick of the round, a character who is about to get her first movie in live action. It's not who you think. Cassandra Webb, aka Madam Web. Now, you know, we gotta say she's about to be in live action, but traditionally, Madam Web has been a little bit older. Now, I do have my theories about whether they'll age up Madam Web at some point, so that she kind of is visually like her comic book counterpart. But Hollywood ageism being what it is, maybe she doesn't get aged all the way up to sort of, kind of similar to how Aunt May is in the comics much older than the 50 something Aunt May that we got in the MCU. I could definitely see that being kind of the middle ground for where Madam Web goes. And to that end, there was a fan cast from this delegation, the South Asian delegation who drafted Madam Web. They picked Padma Lakshmi, who I believe is in that age range. Looks great for her age, so she could play younger her and older her, based on how youthful her visage is. As far as the approval rating for the pick, we are looking at 83.3% approval rating for South Asian Madam Web, Cassandra Webb. I should have said her full name. And for the fan cast, a little bit lower, 62.5% approval rating for the fan cast. But again, I think it's a well placed fan cast, because we've seen her. We're going to see her depicted much younger in the movies than she has been traditionally depicted in the comics. But yeah, I think it's important for at the very least middle-aged representation from an age perspective, if not more elderly representation. So, I like this fan cast, even if the people might feel otherwise. Let us know. Let us know how you feel about Madam Web, as depicted by Padma Lakshmi. So that was quick. I quickly ran through the picks of the round. I might as well talk a little bit about what went down last season. Last week. I think I mentioned that the the challenge didn't go the white delegation's way, which means in Black History Month it went the black delegation's way. They did in fact get T'Challa home, so go ahead and continue to monitor that. Unfortunately, the approval poll for that has already closed by the time you hear this podcast. But they did submit a racial draft fan cast. Obviously with a caveat, given that their real fan cast that they wanted was still Chadwick Boseman, who's no longer with us. But accepting that, because we only allow for living fan casts in our particular game, they went with Aldous Hodge, who you might know from playing Hawkman in the most recent Black Adam film. A lot of black representation this week. It's only fitting. It's Black History Month, so let the blacks out. Well, no, that doesn't sound right, but that might be the title of the episode. Let the blacks out. Let the blacks out. I mean, just let's try that out. But anyway, it's a quick show this week. Not a lot of conversation, not a lot of controversy, as it were. So we'll leave it there. We'll talk. We'll reconvene next week, and hopefully there'll be a little bit more excitement with the picks, and maybe we'll have some people to talk about both the current week's picks and some of their previous picks. I'd love to have some of the delegates on the show. So holler at your boy. In addition, I'll run down the other places that you can find us. If you're listening to us, then keep doing what you're doing. Keep subscribing. Keep downloading and listening to the podcast on your audio platforms. If you're watching me, good on you for putting up with my face for as long as you have. But subscribe, like, do all that stuff on YouTube. Share with your friends, all that good stuff. And of course, follow us on Instagram or Threads, Twitter, Facebook at Racial Draft Podcast. No, sorry, Racial Draft on Facebook. Where else? Oh, like I said, you can send us emails on Gmail. And yeah, those are really all the other places. I mean, we don't have a lot of Patreon rewards yet. We're gonna probably bring that back either later in the season or next season. Shout out to the people who've made Patreon content for us in the past. Before we get back into that, you can find myself at MTFIII on Twitter. You don't try to find me anywhere else. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Until next time, all things are possible.